What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katarina Wallentin. Welcome to this first installment of this podcast adventure, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. And my guest today, to kick this off with a fanfare, is one of the most amazing people I've come across in my journey. It's Dr. Dain Heer. And Dain is a best-selling author, speaker, and tenacious possibility seeker who keeps inspiring people all over the world to embrace what they know, their difference, greatness, and hope. He is the co-creator of Access Consciousness, a body whisperer, and an energy virtuoso. Can nearly say that.
Wow.
Right? I know.
Wow, I like me.
You should like you.
That's cool. I need to have somebody say that to me when I wake up in the morning. Just a reminder, that kind of thing.
I can send you this little tiny piece of recording, and that could be your alarm bell from now on.
Deal.
Possibility in the works. This podcast was inspired by a movie called Tomorrowland, which was like a Disney blockbuster in 2015, zillions of years ago, with George Clooney. And in it, a majority of the people on Earth lost hope about the future, and their point of view was projected back at them with such intensity that they together basically made the Earth end. So together, their point of view became so strong that they destroyed the world. So in this movie, the remedy is the seekers and the dreamers and the ones who know something different is possible, the ones who are still willing to have hope. And the wolf in this podcast name comes from the beginning of that story where the main character talks to her dad about an old Native American parable. And she says there are two wolves who are always fighting. One is darkness and despair, and the other one is light and hope. The question is, which wolf wins? And her dad says, the one you feed. So I was wondering if you could begin by talking about how you see that wolf of possibilities in our world and how you see that we can feed it.
Absolutely. And so my question is, I know it's going to be a spoiler alert, but what happened at the end of the movie? Did the Earth die or did it carry on?
No, the Earth carried on.
Right.
Yes.
And to a certain extent, we're living that right now. And there are a lot of people feeding the wolf of despair and darkness and sadness and no future. And yet there are a lot of us waking up and going, I'm feeding the wolf of possibilities. I'm feeding the wolf of hope but not just the empty hope that some people get into. I hope I get $1 billion tomorrow. This is hope based on knowing that we together have the capacity to change what is going on our planet right now. And we actually are. My sense is we're in the process. And I think a lot of the things that have gone on have had to go on to wake people up, to bring awareness to areas where people were not looking before. And there are a lot of people waking up and calling bullshit on bullshit, which is one of the things that's required, but also recognizing that we together have the power to create a future that is not only sustainable, but really beautiful and joyful and phenomenal. And, that's who's going to be listening to this podcast, the people that actually desire a greater possibilities. The dreamers and seekers of the world are the ones that will find this podcast and go, ooh, that resonates with me. And so the more that we choose things that resonate with us, the more that we choose things that make us lighter, because when you do something or choose something or ask for something that's true for you, it always makes you lighter. A lie always makes you heavier. And so a lot of the heaviness we see in the world is simply based on lies. People are lying to each other. Government is lying to the people. Media is lying and telling the truth. And, it's like blah, blah. But we don't have to fight against that. What we have to do is choose a different reality. And with enough of us doing that, it shows up as if by magic.
It's so funny because I have a few quotes from the movie that I wanted you to comment about. And one of them was actually what you just talked about, which is find the ones who haven't given up. They are the future, which is what you were saying. Yeah. And another quote from there is, in every moment, there is the possibility of a better future, but you people won't believe it. And because you won't believe it, you won't do what is necessary to make it a reality.
And that is why we do what we do. It's why I do what I do. It's why you do what you do. And why so many of us around the world do what we do, and what Access Consciousness is all about. It's about finding those people that do still believe. And once again, it's belief, empty belief ends up resulting in hopelessness and discouragement. But a belief based on knowing, in other words, knowing that there is something different possible first, but also knowing somewhere in your world that this is changeable. And so I would ask people, how many of you actually know that this is changeable? And then from there, then what is the next question? Because I'm a big believer in questions, because questions are awesome, because they always open up another doorway of possibility that you never saw before. And so for me, I'm a really big believer in questions, because basically the question is the number one tool in a dreamer's toolbox or in a seeker's toolbox, because they're seeking something different. How do you get to that difference? And how do you allow it to show up, once again, as if by magic? And we say as if by magic. What that really means is, I don't know the linear steps to make it happen. And we've got to recognize that for massive change, that's how it always occurs. We don't know the linear steps to make it happen. But if we ask a question like, what else is possible? If I were truly creating my future today, what would I choose right away? And Earth, what can we contribute to you? And Earth, what do you know? Are some questions that start to shift our perspective, but they also start to open up awarenesses that we never had before we asked the question.
And before I have some other quotes, but before I go there, there's one of my favorite things that you say a lot in class, and also I've talked about it. One of the main tools that you use is your point of view creates your reality. Your reality does not create your point of view. And this whole idea of this movie and what we create as a future is that it's our point of view creates our reality. So could you talk a little bit more about that?
That is such a big one. And I think people, if they would look at it, they would realize it. But most people don't want to realize it because they want to blame everything outside of them for how their life is showing up. And so this is an invitation to step up and be an adult of consciousness and realize that if you're creating crap in your life, you have some point of view that is creating that crap. So for example, one of my favorite examples of this is, there was a guy being interviewed after Hurricane Andrew went through Florida many years ago. And he was being interviewed and he was on the news. Well, before him, there were several people who were being interviewed and they were railing at God. I can't believe God took my house. And they were just angry and they were upset. And then they get to this guy who's standing there in his underwear in front of the slab where his house used to be. And they're like, sir, you must be devastated, as they were trying to get devastating stories, apparently, as they often do. And he said, well, not really. She's like, sir, how are you? He said, well, I'm okay. Everything I own used to be in that house back there. I moved down here because the doctor said it'd be better for my arthritis. And everything I owned was in that house and now it's gone. And she's like, sir, how are you? He went, I'm okay. At least I got me. And it's like, and if you look at the difference between his point of view, I mean, you can tell just from the story, it's like, he's going to be okay. Whatever happens, he'll be okay. And somebody like that, and the other people are going to be struggling, fighting, because you have to make your point of view right. Unfortunately, That is what we have all learned, is take a fixed point of view. Because when we were little kids and we didn't have a point of view about something, our parents told us, you need to have more of a point of view. Can't you come to some better conclusion? You need to stand up for yourself. Which what they taught us to do was conclude and judge everything into existence, which is why we're in a constant state of judgment of ourselves still today. But this awareness that as the beings we are, we wouldn't do that. We wouldn't come to a fixed conclusion. We would look at what was and ask, what is the greatest possibility here? And so this idea that your point of view creates your reality is one of the biggest gifts we can give ourselves, because whatever point of view we take, we then create the situation that proves that we were right for that point of view. Like, I know a lot of people who have the point of view that money is a struggle. And what happens? They struggle with money. I know a lot of other people who have the point of view that money comes easy. And what happens? Money comes easy. And the weird part is, you would say, well, of course, that's their experience. And so they have lots of money, so it comes easy. It actually doesn't work that way. And, you could all argue with me if you want to. But after you've worked with hundreds of thousands of people and seen how people function, it starts to present itself to you in new and interesting ways. But the way it actually works is you have a point of view, and most of the points of view that we have, especially the ones we fight the most strongly for, are points of view we bought when we were younger at some time prior to now. So you buy a point of view, let's say from your mom and dad, that money is a struggle. Because you have that point of view, because you saw mom and dad struggle with money, well, now you struggle with money. And then after a few times of that, you look at it and go, see, I knew I was right. Money is a struggle. But if you didn't have that as your point of view, probably money wouldn't have been a struggle in the first place. And that wouldn't be your reality, which is why I say your point of view creates your reality.
In the beginning where you were talking about believe and know, so is the belief something we have to prove is right then, but the knowing is shiftable by using questions?
Well, knowing, here's the difference between belief and knowing. Belief is a point of view that you take, that you create as your belief in what is true. Knowing is what actually is true. And the interesting thing about knowing is, if we were to follow our knowing, our lives would work out awesome pretty much all the time. I mean, think about it. How many times have you known not to do something and you did it anyway? And, and then you look afterwards and you go, oh, that turned out just as bad as I knew it would, Yeah. So I said, there, see, I'm adding, again in there. And so we realize that on some fundamental level. And how many times have you known, like, for example, take a different turn when you're driving somewhere, or don't do this business thing, or don't go out with this person, even though they check all the boxes and everybody else says it or they are great. And once you make a choice that follows your knowing, you get lighter. And so knowing is an awareness of what actually is, regardless of what anybody thinks. And so, for example, if you've ever known somebody and everybody else liked them and you were like, there's something off about them, I don't want to get close to them. And then 6 months or a year later, you find out they were swindling money or stealing things, or, in some other way, just really kind of not a cool person. And you're like, oh, I knew it. Oh, my goodness. So one thing I suggest that people do that can start to acknowledge that they do know, because even the idea that we know is a foreign concept. You're not supposed to know, and we were taught that when we were kids. You might give an answer to a math problem. Like, I've worked with hundreds of kids who they just know the answers to the math problems, but they can't show their work. And so they get penalized because the teacher says, you can't know that. And yet somehow the kid knows that, 273 divided by 17.4. And the kid writes down the answer and the teacher's like, how did you get there? And the kid's like, I don't know. I just know, and this is my point of view about how we all would be. But one thing that can help you recognize that is think of 3 things in your life. Okay, just think of one thing in your life that you knew not to do. And then you did it anyway. And then it turned out as badly as you knew it would. For example, I, many years ago, decades ago now, which is kind of nice to say. That means I'm getting old. Don't tell anybody. Decades ago now, I had a girlfriend that I had been with for years. And according to the schedule of life and reality on this planet, of course, it was time for us to start thinking about getting married because we'd been together so long. Well, I really loved her and thought she really loved me. I was wrong. But, I was like, okay, well, she never seemed to realize that I loved her. She never seemed to receive it. And I knew if I asked her to marry me, then she would know that I loved her, or so I thought. And so I started, at that point, I had to buy a cubic zirconia ring because I couldn't afford anything else. And so I go and I'm shopping for the ring. And when the night comes for me to ask her to marry me, I felt like somebody had injected, I don't know, like dark poison into my veins. And I knew not to do it. But I was so committed to living a normal life and so committed to proving to her that I loved her and so committed to making her happy, whether I was happy or not, that I asked her to marry me. Well, I was very grateful that I did it because as she started planning the wedding, I started feeling the walls closing in. And I finally got to a point because I had my friend Gary Douglas, he asked me a question. He said, what will your life be like in 5 years if you go through with the marriage? And what will your life be like if you don't? And I looked and I saw that I would not live through the next 5 years if I went through the marriage. I mean, quite literally, I was going to be gone. And I went, wow. And then I saw if I didn't go through with the marriage and my whole life lightened up. It's a great question to ask. What will my life be like in 5 years if I do? And get the sense of however that is. Don't try to see it because you can't see it, but you can get the sense of the whispers of energy of that. And then what will my life be like if I don't? And go for which one is lighter, because the more light choices you make, the lighter your life gets. So he asked me that question. And I went, oh my goodness, that's why it feels like the walls are closing in, because energetically they are. And so a few months later, I ended up breaking up with her. And finally, after breaking up with her, my life really started taking off. And that's not to say don't do relationships, because there's some great relationships out there where people who support and care and contribute to us, but that's the way a relationship should be. But if you can use that as an example of going against my knowing to such a degree that it quite almost literally ended my life.
And I'm also, so that actually brings me, so I have another quote, because if you go against your knowing and you're also trying to prove that you're right in going against your knowing. So the evil person in this movie, who was played by Hugh Laurie, he says, to save civilization, I would show its collapse. But how do you think this vision was received? How do you think people responded to the prospect of imminent doom? They gobbled it up like chocolate eclair. They didn't fear their demise. They repackaged it. It could be enjoyed as a video game, as TV shows, books, movies. The entire world embraced the apocalypse and sprinted towards it, with glee and abandon. So what is that? What is it where we know this is not true and we know something different is possible, but we still kind of go along with the glee and the doom and the...
Well, quite basically, we've drunk the Kool-Aid that this reality has been handing us over and over and over. And when I say this reality, sometimes people are like, what are you talking about? Well, it's all the structures and all the ways that people think just are. Like, this is just the way it is. And I look at that, and to answer your question, it's like, it's what we have been spoon-fed since the time we were born. Mm-hmm. And that's what our parents were fed, and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, and go back for many, many, many years. And that's what has been shown to us. You know, we've had wars, we've had destruction, we've had whatever. It's been endemic in reality for a long, long time. But the one thing that we haven't had in reality is actually consciousness. And consciousness is where everything and everyone exists, and no one and nothing is judged. And that is a space that opens up possibilities beyond this need. Because what people do is, what they're looking for is a predictable future. And they know that if they stick with this reality, they have a predictable future. It is the future that they were handed. But most of the world, I mean, why are reality shows so friggin' popular? Number one, they're really cheap to make, so they pump them out like candy. And number two, people would rather have access to continuous trauma and drama than they would the space of ease and joy that they could. And people will tell you that they don't. But let me ask y'all a question if you're listening. What did you spend, if you listed the top 5 things that you spent your energy on or put your energy toward in the last week, how many of them were filled with ease and joy? And how many of them were filled with problems and trauma and drama and things you had to solve? The way to know what really is your priority in this moment is to look at the things you spent the most energy on in the last week, because that will show you, are you putting your energy and are you putting your energy into, and your energy is the gift that you have, that you offer the world. And it's the gift that you have that creates and changes your life. And collectively, it's the gift that we have that could create and change reality as we know it, starting with each individual getting the awareness that it's possible. But if you look at that, most people are putting their energy on trauma and drama, and they love it. It's kind of like a drug for them. And the funny part is, so many people would look at that, especially the people listening to this podcast would look at that and go, but that doesn't make sense. Why would people do that? Because they do. Once you get over looking for the why, you get a lot more freedom. Because we tend to look for the why do I do this? Why does the world do this? Why? As though if we get an explanation, then we won't do it anymore. That's not actually the way it works. If you've ever found out why you were doing something but didn't make a different choice, you just kept doing it in the future but judged yourself more because now you know why and you're still doing it. The only thing that actually works is to make a different choice.
And I would say that you made that choice. You've chosen to put your energy and your gift into actually creating a different world. And one of my favorite quotes from this movie, it's the last one I have. It's just, she talks to her mom, the main character, and she wants to become an astronaut, if I remember it rightly. And her mom says, it'll take a long time, a really long time. And what if you get all the way up there and there's nothing? And then this young kid answers, what if there's everything?
That right there. And most people believe there will be nothing if they let go of what they have lived for so long. It's why in the work that we do, we see so many people who they get the awareness that change is possible. They start heading in the direction of that change, but they make it take way longer than it would have to because they want to make sure, is there still something here that I recognize? Is there still something here that I recognize? Is there still something here that I recognize? And I love that. What if there's everything rather than nothing? And that is my point of view. That is also my awareness. But not only that, because there's so many people who talk about different things, but they've never actualized those things. They talk about these things and it sounds wonderful, but they're not living it. They're not actually walking their talk. For me, I've seen this, and I'm living it, which is one thing. And I don't know that I would even be talking about it if I were the only one living it. But it's the tens of thousands of other people that I've seen that have taken the tools that we have and used them that are living it also. That's what lets me know that it works. That's what also lets me know that it's not nothing that's there. It's nothing that's defined as you previously defined reality that's there. It's actually everything that is there.
So sometimes we think we're so small, like one person. Do we really matter? Do I matter? I know you matter because you're like amazing and potent and powerful.
I know you matter because you're amazing too. It's just much easier to see how amazing somebody else is than see how amazing we are.
But that so just that, how does it matter that one person changes their point of view, that one person chooses to see the dream or the possibility instead of the despair and the dread? Like, how does that matter energetically? How does it matter for the world?
Yeah, like, why the heck do I matter to the world? There are 8 billion people on this planet, and I'm not a government official. I'm not a billionaire. What? How do I have an effect? Yeah. Well, what we need to realize is each of us has an effect. And there's two ideas. The first is the 100th monkey idea. where they were studying monkeys on these islands, and they got to a point where they didn't have enough food, so they were actually dropping food to them in helicopters. And these were islands, and the monkeys did not swim from island to island, because I don't know if you know, but monkeys don't seem to like swimming very much. They like trees, And so they dropped food, and the monkeys would pick up the food and eat the dirty food and pick the dirt out and whatever. And what happened is one monkey looked at it and went, "Wait a minute, I don't want dirty food." So it took it to the stream or the ocean, I don't remember which, and washed it.
His name was Dain.
Yeah. There was a monkey named Dain who's like, "I ain't eating this dirty food. What the heck? There's another solution here." And so Dain took his food. And so he went and washed it. So all the other monkeys on the island, the ones that were close to that one, started washing theirs. Well, once 100 monkeys on that island started washing their food, every single monkey on every island started washing their food. So what if you're the 100th monkey? Because what we don't realize, we have this idea of mass consciousness. I would say it's more mass unconsciousness. But that idea that we are all connected, and one of the things I try to get across to people is you are not either the drop nor the drop or the ocean. You're simultaneously the drop and the ocean. And so what each drop chooses affects the entire ocean. But this idea that your choice is not enough to change the world is a mistake designed to make sure that you don't make the choices that change the world. Because look at it, Katarina, how much has it changed your daughter's life to have you being not only happier, but more aware and less of a dramatic mom?
Everything. It changed everything in her life when that changed.
Yeah, so she's a different person walking around because of you.
Yeah.
And because of you changing, yes or no?
Yeah. Yes.
And so how many people has she affected by being the different person that she is? In a far greater way than she would have been able to before.
Yeah.
So that is how, and that's just one, that's a linear example that's actually nonlinear, but it's a linear example of how that change occurs, and realizing that the happier you get, the more contribution you are to the world. Because the world, we've done so many studies, and we found that when you direct anger at a plant, you kill it. When you direct meanness at a plant, you kill it. If you direct that energy, if you write nasty words on water and freeze it into ice and look at the structure, its structure is deformed. Well, what does it do to have 8 billion primarily unhappy people living on the planet right now that are not living from a sense of joy and not living from a sense of possibilities, but living from primarily unhappiness, primarily trauma and drama, with tiny moments of happiness interspersed? What do you think that does to our entire planet and its vital energy and its life force, if you will? It kills it. And I mean, not that we could kill the planet, quote unquote, but we can severely diminish the beautiful energy that it has available by all of our points of view. You changing your point of view changes the world. And Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, said to me when we started working together, he said, look, if you change one person's reality, you're a success. You change one person's life for the greater, you're a success. You've made the world a better place. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. I'm interested in that.
Well, I was going to ask you, and I'll still ask you, you just gave one piece of advice, but if somebody wants to today go out and feed the world for possibility, just to do one single thing, one single action that which will change the future, what would you suggest they start with?
Do anything that makes you happy and puts a smile on your face. And that sounds so, I don't know. A lot of people would say, it doesn't sound like enough. I need to do something significant. I need to go climb Mount Everest. But you've had a lot of people climb Mount Everest. Has it really changed the world at all? I mean, when the first guy did, that was awesome. And he finally made it. And wow, awesome, it's possible. But since then, has any of that ever changed the world? Not nearly as much as you smiling at someone because you're happy, you giving somebody a hug because they need it, I'd say that changes the world more than most of the people who have ever climbed Mount Everest. Now, I'm not saying don't climb Mount Everest. Hey, that's fun for you. If that gives you a sense of personal accomplishment, that trickles out into the world also. But it's not the things that we think that truly feed the wolf of possibilities. It's far easier than that. It's the things that we do from a sense of space, a sense of ease, a sense of gratitude, a sense of joy. That's how we feed the wolf of possibilities. And if we would just ask to have more of that in our lives and be more of that in our lives, then we would be more of that in the world. And with enough of us being more of that in the world will be that, because we do have this interconnection with everyone and everything. And, Einstein said every molecule has consciousness and every molecule communicates with every other molecule. And that is how we change the world, by becoming the us we would like to be, and the happy, kind, generative, joyful, creative, grateful beings that we would like to be.
It's funny. It sounds so easy that the very insight that would actually have an impact is provocative in a way. Like, it's like, what? It can't be that easy. And yes, what if it is that easy that your joy and you be the molecule of joy that turns the world to a different path?
And you are, everybody listening, you are. But don't put the weight of the world on your shoulders. That's not going to make you any happier. Recognize you can let the weight of the world off of your shoulders and be that which brings lightness to the world. And then you don't have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders anymore. You're doing it from a different space that invites the world to change itself with your contribution.
You say we're neither. No, you have to say the drop in the ocean thing. Say that, because I always mix it up.
We're not either the drop or the ocean. We are the drop and the ocean simultaneously.
Thank you so much. So go out, go forth, and be happy.
Yes, and have way more fun than you're supposed to. The world needs it. You have permission. I'm a doctor. This is your prescription.
Perfect. You are now prescribed. Go forth and fulfill. Thank you so much, Dain, for joining us today.
Thanks, Katarina.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit katarinawallentin.com/wolf.